He lived on the streets, and from morning to night people walked past him as if he was invisible. Every day he sat near the same corner, close to an old bakery where the smell of warm bread filled the air, but he rarely tasted any of it. His clothes were torn, his shoes had holes, and his hair was messy, making him look older than his age. He was just a boy. But life had pushed him into a place where even adults struggled to survive. Most people never stopped to ask why he was alone or how long he had been there. They only saw a dirty child and assumed he was a troublemaker. Some looked at him with cold eyes, others shook their heads with judgment, and some even stepped further away, as if he carried danger in his shadow, but deep inside him. He carried something nobody on the street could see. Inside his small backpack, the only thing he protected more than food was a broken music notebook. The pages were torn, some were stained, some almost unreadable. But he held on to it like it was the last piece of his heart. Whenever he opened it, his eyes softened, as if the messy streets around him disappeared and he entered another world, a world where only music existed. Every night he slept near the old train station, the safest place he could find. The sound of trains arriving and leaving became part of his life. To most people, it was noise, but to him, it was rhythm. He would listen carefully, imagining each sound as a musical note: the sharp whistles, the deep engine rumble, the soft footsteps of passengers. Everything became music in his mind. Sometimes he would sit with his back against the station wall and close his eyes. Picturing a real piano in front of him, he imagined running his fingers across the keys, playing the melodies he heard in the world around him. He had never touched a real piano, but he had watched others play from windows, from street performers, and even from videos on display screens outside stores. He memorized the movement of their hands, the timing, the emotion, and practiced them in the air using invisible keys. He had no teacher, no home, no instrument. But he had something stronger, a deep love for music that no hardship could destroy. Even when he was hungry, even when he shivered in the cold, he hummed the tunes he imagined, letting them warm him from inside. People thought he was just mumbling nonsense, but he was actually composing little pieces, tiny songs only he understood. But despite his inner world, the reality around him was harsh. People mocked him, whispering things like he's useless or he should just go away. Children were pulled away by their parents, afraid he might be dangerous. Shop owners chased him off if he stood in front of their doors for too long. Cars splashed dirty water on him on rainy days, and nobody apologized. It was as if the world had decided he was not worth kindness. Still, even with all the cruelty, he never lost the soft glow in his eyes whenever he heard music. One day, he found an old man playing a violin near a bridge. The boy stood silently behind him. Watching with full concentration, the old man noticed him, smiled kindly, and kept playing. When he finished, he asked the boy, "Do you like music?" The boy nodded shyly, afraid to speak too long because people usually told him to leave. But the old man did not push him away. Instead, he played a simple melody just for him, and the boy listened with his whole heart. Moments like that gave him strength. They reminded him that there was beauty in the world, even if he had to search for it, and each time he found a moment of beauty, he put the memory inside his notebook, drawing small symbols and shapes that only he understood. They were not perfect notes, but they were his. He lived a lonely life, but he never stopped dreaming. He never stopped imagining music filling the air around him. He believed that someday he would play a real piano, even if he had no idea how or when. The world ignored him, mocked him, and pushed him aside, but deep inside him, something bright refused to die. And though people only saw a boy who looked weak and forgotten, they had no idea they were passing by someone who carried a gift that could silence a whole room. That afternoon, the boy walked through the busy streets with slow steps, hoping to find a quiet place where he could rest from the noise of the world. He didn't know that fate was guiding him toward something that would change his life forever. As he turned the corner, he saw a small cafe filled with warm lights, people chatting, and the soft sound of clinking cups. But what caught his attention wasn't the people or the food. It was the beautiful black piano standing near the entrance. Shining under the golden lamps, he stopped walking and stood completely still. His heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from longing. He stared at the piano the way a thirsty man looks at water. He had never been so close to a real instrument before. Every key seemed to call him, almost whispering his name inside the cafe. The customers noticed him. A few of them exchanged looks and sighed. Some whispered things like, "Why is he standing there?" or "He's making the place look bad." A group of young people sitting near the door laughed openly when they saw his torn clothes and messy hair. One girl wrinkled her nose and said loudly enough for him to hear, "He probably doesn't even know what a piano is." Another laughed and added, "If he touches it, it will go out of tune." Their voices cut through him like cold wind. But he did not move away. Something deep inside held him in place. His eyes stayed locked on the piano. Like he was seeing a long-lost friend, the cafe crowd grew louder. Some mocked him, some shook their heads, and a few even told the waiter to chase him away. The boy lowered his gaze, but his feet refused to take even one step backward. It was the closest he had ever been to his dream, and he could not let it go. Then something unexpected happened. A young waiter came to the door holding a tray and saw the boy staring at the piano. Instead of showing kindness, he smirked and said in a mocking tone, "Hey kid, you like the piano? Think you can play it?" The cafe erupted in laughter. The boy stayed quiet. His chest felt tight. But he didn't walk away. He simply looked at the waiter with calm, deep eyes. Eyes that had seen too much pain to be scared by a few insults. The waiter, enjoying the attention of the crowd, stepped outside and crossed his arms. "Tell you what," he said loudly so everyone could hear, "if you can play even one proper song, I'll give you free food, but if you can't, you walk away and don't come back." More laughter followed, echoing through the street like sharp stones thrown at him. For a moment, the boy felt his hands tremble. A challenge like this had never been given to him. The whole cafe was against him, waiting for him to fail. They wanted a show. They wanted to laugh. They wanted to prove he was nothing. But then, something changed in his eyes. A spark lit up, the same spark he carried each night while imagining invisible piano keys beneath his fingers. He slowly lifted his head and looked at the waiter, then at the piano, and he nodded. Gasps spread through the cafe. No one had expected him to accept. Some customers leaned forward in excitement. Others laughed louder. Some even took out their phones to record what they believed would be a humiliating moment. But the boy wasn't thinking about the crowd, the laughter, or the challenge. His mind was focused on only one thing: the piano. The instrument he had dreamed of touching since the day he first heard a melody. As he stepped forward, the world around him seemed to fade. The voices softened, the laughter sounded distant, and all he could hear was the quiet rhythm of his own heartbeat. He was about to walk into a moment that would either break him or reveal who he truly was, and without knowing it, everyone in that cafe was about to witness something they would remember for the rest of their lives. The boy walked toward the piano with slow steps, each step carrying both fear and courage together. He could feel everyone's eyes on him. Heavy and sharp like stones, the cafe crowd leaned forward, ready to laugh the moment he failed. Some whispered bets, some smiled with cruel excitement, and a few recorded the scene on their phones, thinking it would be funny to watch later. But the boy wasn't focused on them. His eyes stayed locked on the piano, the one thing in his life that had ever felt like hope. To him, the piano wasn't just wood and keys. It was a doorway, a promise, a dream he had carried through hunger, cold nights, and endless loneliness. The waiter who challenged him stood beside the instrument with a proud grin. He thought the boy would touch the keys, make a horrible sound, and run away embarrassed. "Go on, kid," he said, with mocking confidence. "Show us your big talent." More laughter echoed behind him. The boy reached the piano but didn't sit right away. He lifted his hands slowly, almost afraid the piano would disappear if he touched it too quickly. For a moment he hovered there, feeling the cold air above the keys, imagining the sound they might make. His fingers trembled, not because he doubted himself, but because this moment felt unreal, like a miracle he didn't deserve. Some customers grew impatient. "Come on, let's get this over with," one man muttered. Another said, "He's scared. He's going to run." Someone else laughed and replied, "He probably doesn't even know what a note is." But the boy stayed still, breathing deeply, letting the noise fade, letting his heart calm. He knew that if he listened to the crowd, he would lose before he even began. Finally, he sat down in front of the piano. The seat was warm from the last player, a warmth he had never felt before. It made him feel strange, almost safe. He placed both hands gently on his lap, gathering strength. This was the moment he had imagined 1,000 times while sitting under cold streetlights, or hiding from rain under broken roofs. He had practiced on invisible keys, memorized every movement from performers he watched through windows, and trained his mind to hear music, even in the sound of trains and footsteps. Now, for the first time in his life, the dream and the reality were touching. The waiter leaned closer and said in a low voice, "If you're too scared, you can still walk away." But his words did not reach the boy. The boy was already somewhere else, inside a world made only of rhythm and memory. He lifted his right hand, slowly, carefully, like someone lifting a fragile piece of glass. The entire cafe fell into a strange silence. Even those who had been laughing just seconds ago stopped mid-smile. The air around them felt different, tighter, like something important was about to happen. And then the boy pressed a single key. A soft, trembling note filled the room, small but clear. It surprised everyone, including him. He pressed another key, then another. Each sound carried a piece of his past, the cold nights at the train station, the loneliness, the hope he never let die. The crowd fell completely silent now. Every eye was watching him, not with mockery anymore, but with confusion, uncertainty, a strange curiosity. It was the first time anyone had ever looked at him without judgment. The boy felt something shift inside him, a door opening, a flood of courage rushing through him. He placed both hands on the keys. This time with confidence, his heartbeat slowed, his breathing steadied, and he whispered softly to himself, "Just play." In that single moment, the challenge disappeared, the crowd disappeared, and the entire world shrank into the piano before him. He was no longer a street boy, no longer hungry, no longer invisible. He was simply a musician, about to show the world who he truly was. When the boy placed both hands on the piano, something inside him settled into perfect stillness. It was as if the whole world stopped breathing for 1 second. The cafe that had been filled with laughter and noise only moments before now felt heavy and silent. Everyone watched him, but he no longer felt their eyes on his back. His heart slowed, his breathing softened. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged somewhere. He pressed the first group of keys, and a soft melody flowed out, gentle like the sound of rain on a quiet roof. The boy's shoulders relaxed as the notes filled the room, turning the cold cafe air warm. The people who had mocked him earlier frowned in confusion, as if their brains couldn't understand what they were hearing. The melody grew stronger with each second, uncertain at first, but slowly shaping itself into something beautiful. His fingers moved carefully, almost shyly, like he was meeting an old friend after years of waiting. He had no sheet music, no training, no teacher. But he had something greater, a heart that had survived the hardest life and still found room for music. The waiter who had challenged him stood frozen, the smirk wiped clean from his face. His tray tilted to the side, almost slipping from his hand. A couple near the door stopped mid-laugh, their eyes slowly widening as the boy's melody wrapped around them. The boy leaned closer to the keys, letting his fingers glide across them as if they had been waiting for him all along. He didn't just play the piano, he connected with it. Each note was a memory, each chord a feeling he could never say out loud. He remembered the nights he spent hiding from the cold, humming to keep himself awake, and how he imagined each hum turning into music. He remembered watching people play through windows, memorizing every gesture with a hungry heart. He remembered whispering to himself, "One day," even when the world gave him no reason to hope. And now, here he was, sitting in front of a real piano, playing a melody so pure that it melted the coldness of the room. Each note he played shook something deep inside the listeners. The music didn't sound like it came from a child. It sounded like it came from someone who carried a lifetime of emotion. One woman near the counter felt tears rise in her eyes. She didn't understand why she was crying, but the melody touched something delicate in her heart. An elderly man put down his newspaper slowly, staring at the boy like he was witnessing a miracle. A group of teenagers who had laughed the loudest earlier now sat quietly, their phones lowered, unable to look away. For the first time in his life, the boy wasn't invisible. He wasn't the child people avoided on the streets. He wasn't the kid they judged by his torn clothes. In this moment, he was someone extraordinary. The melody grew stronger, more confident, as if it had been waiting years to escape. The boy's fingers, though small and thin, moved with surprising grace. His left hand created a soft foundation, while his right hand carried the emotion. The harmony between the two felt natural, like breathing, as he played. The cafe lights seemed to glow softer, warmer. The air felt different, lighter, full of something magical. People leaned forward, afraid to blink, terrified they might miss even 1 second of the music. It was no longer entertainment. It was a story told without words. A story of pain, dreams, courage, and survival. The boy didn't hear the audience gasp. He didn't see the waiter's stunned face. He didn't notice the phones slowly lowering. He was lost in the world he had carried inside his heart his entire life. He played as if he had been born for this moment, as if every hardship he had endured had carved this music into his soul. And when he finally lifted his hands from the keys, the final note hung in the air, delicate and trembling, like a small bird afraid to fly away. But before anyone could react, before anyone could clap or speak, the boy gently placed one hand on the piano, almost in gratitude, as if telling it, "Thank you for hearing me." The cafe remained silent, too moved, too shocked, too overwhelmed to break the magic of the moment. They had mocked him, doubted him, judged him. But now, they were witnessing a truth none of them could deny. The boy they ignored was no ordinary child. He was something rare, something powerful, something unforgettable. The final note faded into the air like a soft whisper, but its echo stayed inside every heart in the cafe. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. It felt as if time itself was stunned by what the boy had just done. The room that once overflowed with laughter now stood frozen in a silence filled with awe. Then, as if waking from a dream, people slowly blinked and looked at one another, confused, embarrassed, almost frightened by the beauty they had heard. They had come expecting to witness a joke, a failure, something to mock. But instead, they had seen a miracle growing out of the most unexpected place, a street boy with music inside his soul. The boy remained seated, his hands resting lightly on his lap. His heart beat fast, not because he was nervous, but because he felt alive in a way he had never felt before. He didn't dare raise his head, afraid that if he looked up, the moment might disappear. Like a dream breaking at sunrise, but something in the air had changed. Something big, something powerful, something he didn't understand yet. A man sitting near the middle of the cafe leaned forward, whispering, This kid can really play." His voice was thin. Trembling with disbelief, a woman beside him wiped her eyes quickly. Hoping nobody noticed her tears, the waiter who had challenged him stood frozen, his tray hanging awkwardly at his side. The confidence he had proudly displayed only minutes ago had vanished completely. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Not even an apology, not yet, because even his guilt needed time to catch up with the shock. The cafe manager stepped out from the back room, drawn by the sudden silence. At first, he didn't understand why the usually loud cafe was so quiet. But when he saw the boy at the piano and the stunned expressions on everyone's faces, he stopped walking, his old eyes softened with a mixture of surprise and admiration. What did he just do? Someone whispered from the back, "Everything," another replied softly. The boy finally lifted his gaze, just a little, enough to see the faces in front of him. Faces that once looked at him with disgust and mockery were now filled with something entirely different. Shock, guilt, admiration, even respect. He had changed the entire room without speaking a word. All with a melody born from hunger, loneliness, and the quiet dreams he carried in his heart. A teenager who had filmed the moment lowered his phone slowly. For the first time in his life, not thinking about views or likes, he stared at the screen. Replaying the small clip of the boy's hands moving over the keys, the teen whispered to himself, "No way. This is real talent." Another group who had mocked the boy earlier looked down. Unable to meet his eyes, their laughter had died, crushed by the weight of their own cruelty. They had judged a child with torn clothes and empty pockets, never imagining he held more beauty in his fingers than most people carried in their whole lives. The melody seemed to linger, floating between the walls and tables. It filled the cafe with warmth, turning the once cold atmosphere into something soft and fragile. People who had entered the cafe only to drink coffee found themselves experiencing something unforgettable. They didn't know whether to clap, cry, or stay silent. They only knew they had been humbled, deeply and completely. The boy sat quietly, unsure what to do next. He wasn't used to attention, wasn't used to respect, wasn't used to kindness. He had walked through life invisible, and now suddenly all eyes were on him, not with hatred but with awe. His mind whispered a single thought, small but bright: did they like it? And then something happened that nobody expected. The manager stepped forward, his voice gentle, respectful. "Careful not to frighten the boy, son," he said softly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The boy looked down at his hands, the same hands that begged for coins, searched for food, held torn blankets on cold nights, and whispered quietly, "I learned by listening." The cafe fell silent again. Not because of doubt, but because of the raw truth in his answer. They finally understood the world had ignored him, but music never had. And now, his music was about to change everything. The cafe was silent, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of emotion, full of guilt, full of awe, full of respect for the boy who had just changed the room with nothing but music. The boy looked around with shy eyes, trying to understand why everyone stared at him as if he were someone important. And then, suddenly, someone in the back clapped. Just once, soft but sincere. It was enough to break the stillness. Others slowly followed, one pair of hands after another. Their claps grew louder, warmer, turning into a wave of applause that filled the entire cafe. The sound washed over the boy like sunlight. He had never heard applause for himself, never felt appreciation, never seen people look at him with admiration instead of disgust. For a moment, he didn't know how to breathe. His chest tightened, his eyes stung, and he had to blink fast to keep tears from falling. A woman standing near the counter stepped forward, her voice shaky. "That was beautiful," she said. Her hands trembled slightly. "I've heard trained musicians, but none played with this kind of heart." The boy looked down again. Unsure how to respond, he wasn't used to kindness, and compliments felt too heavy for him to carry. But the kindness didn't stop. A man in a suit walked closer, leaning on his cane. "Son, your melody." It had pain, but also hope. It felt like it was telling a story, he said softly. "Your story?" People around him nodded, their earlier cruelty now replaced with deep regret. They had judged him by his torn clothes and dirty shoes, by the street dust on his face, by the life he never chose. But the melody had shattered those judgments. The music had spoken louder than their assumptions, louder than their pride, louder than their mocking. The waiter who had challenged him stepped forward slowly, guilt weighing down his shoulders. His voice was small now, nothing like the loud arrogance he had shown earlier. "Kid, I shouldn't have mocked you," he whispered. "I'm sorry." The boy lifted his eyes for a second, surprised by the apology, but he did not respond. Not because he was angry, but because he didn't know how to accept an apology from someone who had laughed at him moments earlier. The manager stepped closer, his eyes warm and full of something the boy hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine respect. "Do you want something to eat?" he asked gently. "Anything you want. It's on the house." The boy hesitated. His stomach growled softly, his body reminding him how hungry he was. But he wasn't thinking about food. His mind was still on the piano. His heart was still beating in rhythm with the last note he played. One of the customers asked, "Where are your parents?" The boy flinched slightly, looking away. He whispered so quietly that the room had to lean in to hear him. "I don't have any." A heavy silence filled the room again, not from shock, but from sorrow. People looked at one another, realizing why his clothes were torn, why he carried a broken music notebook, why he stood outside the cafe like someone staring at a dream he didn't dare touch. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't a beggar by choice. He was a child who had been surviving alone, a child who had taught himself music by listening to the world. An older woman stepped closer and gently touched his shoulder. "Sweetheart, you're special," she said with trembling voice. "You're a gift." The boy couldn't remember the last time anyone had said something kind about him. If ever, his throat tightened, his eyes became glossy. But he held the tears back with all his strength. The cafe that once mocked him now looked at him with something close to devotion. They didn't see a street boy anymore. They saw a prodigy, a virtuoso, a child who played like someone who carried a universe inside his heart. But the most powerful change was not in the people. It was in the boy for the first time in his life. He felt something unfamiliar, something warm, something bright. He felt hope, a small spark, but strong enough to change everything. He looked at the piano again, and for the first time ever, he allowed himself to believe a dangerous idea. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't born to be invisible. Maybe he was born to be heard. Maybe he was born for music. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling it left inside the boy stayed bright and warm. Like a small fire in the cold darkness of his life, he stood up from the piano seat slowly, unsure if he should walk away, stay, or speak. The attention felt unreal, almost frightening, because he had never been the center of anything except judgment. But before he could step back, the cafe manager approached him with gentle steps. as if he were approaching something fragile and precious. "Son," he said softly, "that music. It wasn't ordinary. You have something rare." The boy swallowed hard, his eyes lowering to the floor again. He didn't know how to answer compliments. They felt too big, too heavy for someone who was used to hearing insults. Then the manager continued, "Do you want to come inside? Sit, eat, rest. Maybe even play again if you want to." The boy froze. His heart beat faster. People had often ordered him to leave places, but nobody had ever invited him in. The customers watched with soft eyes now, their earlier cruelty replaced with genuine concern. An older man who had been quiet the whole time stood up from his chair and came forward. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and a scarf around his neck. He looked like someone you could trust. He knelt slightly so he could speak to the boy at eye level. "My name is Mr. Hale," the man said gently. "I teach music. I've been teaching for 40 years. And what you played today?" He paused, trying to control the emotion in his voice. "What you played didn't come from training. It came from your soul." The boy stared at him, shocked. A real music teacher, talking to him, listening to him, praising him. Mr. Hale continued, "If you allow me, I want to teach you properly. I want to help you grow your gift." The cafe gasped softly. Some people even smiled, relieved that someone finally recognized the boy's potential. But the boy didn't smile. He looked confused, almost scared. Why would someone want to help him? Why would a music teacher care about a child who slept by a train station? What if it was a joke? What if the kindness disappeared tomorrow? Sensing his fear, Mr. Hale placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "You don't have to decide now, but know this, your talent deserves a chance. You deserve a chance." The boy felt something break inside him. Not in a painful way, but in a way that released years of hidden emotion. A life without kindness, a life without home, a life without someone to believe in him. It had been his reality for so long that genuine compassion felt unreal. The waiter stepped forward too, guilt heavy in his posture. "Kid, I really am sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have made fun of you. I didn't know. I didn't know you were this good." The boy nodded slightly, not out of forgiveness, but because he didn't know what else to do. The manager then said something that shocked everyone. "If you want, you can come here every day," he offered. "Play the piano whenever you wish. This place is open to you." A warm murmur spread through the cafe. Someone said, "Yes, let him play." Another added, "He belongs here." The boy felt his eyes fill with tears. He quickly wiped them away with the back of his hand. Embarrassed, he had been hungry, lonely, mocked, ignored all his life, but today, he wasn't alone. Today, people wanted him, appreciated him, welcomed him. Mr. Hale gently asked him, "What's your name, son?" The boy hesitated, then whispered softly, "My name is Liam." Mr. Hale smiled warmly. "Liam, you have a gift the world needs to hear for the first time." The boy felt something powerful rising inside him. Not fear, not sadness, not loneliness, but a soft, glowing hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, his life could change. He looked at the piano again, the instrument that had opened a door he never knew existed, and quietly, in a voice filled with wonder and disbelief, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is my beginning." Liam didn't know how long he stood there, surrounded by people who, just an hour earlier, didn't even want him near the cafe. The same people who mocked him were now looking at him as if he were someone extraordinary, someone valuable, someone meant for more than sleeping on cold pavement. It felt unreal, like he had stepped into someone else's dream. Not his own. Mr. Hale, the music teacher, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Liam," he said softly, "you don't have to go back to the cold tonight. Come with me. I promise you a warm bed, food, and a safe place to stay. Liam's heart shook. No one had ever offered him shelter before. No one had ever wanted him. He wasn't used to kindness that didn't ask something in return. He looked up at Mr. Hale with wide, unsure eyes. "Why? Why would you help me?" he whispered. Mr. Hale's answer was simple: because someone has to. And because you're a child with a gift, and gifts should be protected. The cafe manager stepped beside them and added, "And this place will always be open for you. You want to practice? Come anytime. This piano will wait for you." Liam felt a warmth inside him that he had never felt in his entire life. It wasn't food. It wasn't safety. It was something deeper. It was belonging. The customers around him gently approached. One offered him a warm coat. Another handed him a sandwich. Another wiped her eyes and said, "You reminded us what beauty sounds like." Liam didn't know what to say. He simply held the coat close to his chest and nodded shyly. That night, for the first time in years, he didn't sleep on the cold station floor. He walked beside Mr. Hale through the quiet evening streets, each step feeling like a step out of his old life and into something new. When they reached Mr. Hale's small home, Liam hesitated at the door. His hand trembled slightly. He had never entered a real home since the day he lost his family. He whispered, "Are you sure? It's okay for me to come in." Mr. Hale smiled warmly. "Liam, this door will always be open for you." Liam stepped inside, and the warmth hit him like sunlight. A soft bed, a warm blanket, a bowl of hot soup, things the world had denied him for so long, all waiting for him now. That night, he fell asleep with a full stomach, a warm blanket, and a heart finally free of fear. He didn't dream of the cold, or hunger, or loneliness. He dreamed of a piano, of music rising like light through darkness. He dreamed of a future, something he never allowed himself to imagine before. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Liam practiced every day in the cafe, his fingers learning faster than anyone had ever seen. Mr. Hale taught him everything he knew: technique, expression, emotion, but always reminded him, "Your real strength, Liam, is inside your heart, not your hands." People began to gather at the cafe, not for coffee, but for him. Videos of him playing spread all over the city and then all over the internet. Musicians, teachers, and even reporters came just to see the street boy who played like a virtuoso. But no matter how famous he became, Liam never forgot the streets he came from. He used his talent to bring hope, playing at shelters, orphanages, and public places where lost children sat the same way he once had. He told them, "Don't give up. If music can save me, something can save you too." 1 year later, the cafe where he first played hosted his first official concert. The place was packed, the lights warm, the air electric with excitement. And when Liam sat at the piano, the same piano that changed his life, he looked at the crowd and whispered a silent promise: "I won't waste this chance." He placed his fingers on the keys, and the moment he played the first note, the room lit up with emotion. He wasn't a street boy anymore. He wasn't invisible. He wasn't forgotten. He was Liam, the boy who turned life's harshest pain into music that touched the world. And as the final note of his concert floated through the cafe, strong and bright, Liam smiled, the kind of smile that only someone who survived darkness and found their place in the light can ever truly give. His story was no longer about being ignored. It was about being heard, about rising, about becoming everything he was meant to be. The boy they once mocked became the boy the world clapped for, a true virtuoso born from the streets. And a reminder that talent can bloom even in the coldest corners of the world when someone finally gives it a chance.